Good morning, girls. Welcome you once again for my English class. Today, we are going to deal in the second unit poetry. In that, we are going to see second poem, that is Ode to Nightingale by John Keats. So first, who is John Keats? He is an English romantic poet born on October 31st, 1795 in London. In 1816, Keats became a licensed apothecary. Apothecary means a person one who sold medicine or a drug. But he never practiced his profession, deciding instead to write poetry. In July 1820, he published his third and best volume of poetry, Lamia Isabella, The Eve of St. Agnes, and other poems. So today in this topic we are going to see, first of all, what is ode. So an ode is a type of lyrical stanza. It is an elaborately structured poem praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. An ode is a type of lyrical stanza. Okay, it is an elaborately structured poem praising, addressing, or glorifying an event or an individual, addressing someone. Okay, describing a nature intellectually, clearly, okay, as well as emotionally. A classic ode is structured in three major parts: the strophe, the antistrope, and the epode. Different forms such as homostropic ode and irregular ode also enter. So a classic ode is old ode is structured in three major parts, that is the stropo, antistrope, and the epode. Different from such as homostropic ode and the irregular ode also enter. So for now we are going to see English ode. Okay, the lyrics can be various themes. The earliest odes in the English language using the word in its striot, from where the epithalamium and prothalamium of Edmund Spenser in the 17th century. The most important original odes in English were by Abraham Cowardly. These were imbibed out at irregular line length patterns and moves as such ones. Cowardly, based on the principle of is Pindoics on an apparent misunderstanding of Pindarus' metrical practice, but nonetheless other widely imitated his style with a notable success by John Dryden. Actually, the English ode can be various themes in lines. The lyrics can be on various themes. The earliest ode in English language, okay, using the word striot, from where the epithalamium and prothalamium of Edmund Spenser. So now, the English ode. The lyrics can be on a various themes. The earliest odes in the English language using the word in its strict form were the epithalamium and prothalamium of Edmund Spenser. Actually, the lyrics can be on various themes in the earliest odes in the English language using the word in its strict form concerning a rule severely, from where the epithalamium and prothalamium of Edmund Spenser. So the epithalamium and prothalamium is one of the famous work of Edmund Spenser. In the 17th century, the most important original odes in English were by Abraham Cowley. Okay, so in the 17th century, the most important and original odes in English were by Abraham Cowley. So these were imbibed and Imbaic but had a irregular line length patterns. Irregular, not in the regular line. It is a irregular line length patterns and rhyme schemes. Irregular line length patterns or rhyme schemes. Okay, Kavli based the principle of Pindoics on an apparent misunderstanding of Pindora's material practice, but nonetheless others widely imitated his style. Okay, nonetheless others were widely imitated his style with not able success by notable success by notable success by John Dryden. Okay, it was widely adapted. Okay, Abraham Cowley's styles in ode. He mostly uses based the principle of Pindaic on an apparent misunderstanding of Pindara's metrical practice, but nonetheless other widely imitated his style with notable success by John Dryden. So now there are three types of odes. Three types of odes. There are three types of ode from forms such as Pindaric, Orician, and irregular. There are a three typical form of odes, that is the Pindaric, Orician, and irregular. So here just see the ode. They shall grow not old, as we that are left your hold. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. So this is the example of one word. So the ode is praising or glorifying individual. Okay, so the first type is the Pindaric ode. The Pindaric ode, also known as the Greek ode, derives its name from Greek poet who wrote songs performed by dancers and choruses of singers. They celebrated major events and moments in history. These songs were irregular in the length, metrical pattern, and rhymes, but were constantly made up of three parts. The three sections is the stropo, antistropo, and episode. So, Pindaric ode. Okay. So, there are a few well-known examples of Pindaric ode, including a Williams Wordsworth ode, that is intimation of immorality from reflection of early childhood. Take a look at these lines from the ode. Okay, there was a time when meadow grew and stream, the earth and every common sign. To me did seem uphurled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. So this is about Pindaric ode. The second one is Ocean ode. The next type of ode we are going to uh, take a look at this, the Ocean. It comes from the Latin tradition of the Alcoholic ode and is written with the intention of crafting a calm and contemplative tone. Okay, these odes were meant to bring peace to the reader. The ode was named for the 1st century BC poet Horace. So these love, joy, and the act of these written works are usually concerned with theme of love, joy, and the act of writing. These poems are short and made up of around the two quatrains. Take a look at ode on Solitude by Alexander Pope as an example of Ocean Ode. So this is about Ocean Ode. So now I'm going to read some of the Ocean poetic lines from Ode to Solitude written by Alexander Pope. Okay, happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal cacras bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground. So, in throughout this poem, a pope expresses his appreciation for solitude and the peace it can bring about. So now we are going to see the third type, that is the irregular ode. An irregular ode is a poem that does not conform to either the structure set out in the oration or a pandaric form. The verse is generally irregular and the stanza lack any sort of prescribed order. There is no form rhyme scheme in this kind of ode, giving the poet the freedom to experiment with their with their verses. Keats' odes are some of the most famous example of the irregular form. Here are a few lines from Keats' ode, that is a Ode to Nightingale, written in 1819. Actually, in this poem is only we are going to deal. So, thou was not born for death, immortal bride, bad. Now, no hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was here. In ancient days, by temper and clown, perhaps the self same song that found a path through the set the heart of Ruth when sick for home. So this is only a one small part of what many lovers of poetry consider to the Keats' best ode. It is dedicated as the little suggests to a nightingale. Throughout the a poem, Keats touches on theme of life, death, and flitting nature of pleasure. So this is the three types of ode. The first two types are following the metrical form, but in the last one it is a irregular form. There is a no rhyme scheme at all. In for most of this pattern, this type of ode used by John Keats. So now this is the three types of odes. So let me move to the next slide. So for example of Ode on a Gratianon by John Keats were written based on his experiments with the sonnet. Other well-known odes include Percy Bysshe Shelley, that is a P.B. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, Robert Carlyle's America, Bernadette Mayer's Ode on Period, and Robert Lowell's Quaker Graveyard in Nantucket. So these are the best example for odes. Okay, here I fixed one picture. In that you can see the lines that which is Keats lived at Wentworth Place during the composition of 1819 odes. 1819 odes. So this is the place where he mostly used to sat and start to write the odes. Okay, so let's see the next one. So now we are going to see the biography of John Keats. Okay, who is John Keats? He is a romantic poet. So here we are going to see John Keats. He was born on 31st October 1795. Okay, and he died on 23rd February 1821. Was an English romantic poet. Okay, already I told he was an English romantic poet. He was one of the main figure of the second generation of romantic poets. He was one of the important figure in the second generation of romantic poets. Along with Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, that means P.B. Shelley, despite his work having been in publication for only 4 years before his death from tuberculosis at the age of 25. Actually, he was coming under the second generation of romantic poet, and one of the important man or important figure in the second generation. Along with him, Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, despite having a work been in published for only 4 years before his death from tuberculosis. So he was died because of tuberculosis at the age of 25. Now, although his poems were not generally well received by critics, okay, so his poems are not received by well critics. During his lifetime, he repartages grew after his death and the end of the 19th century. He had become one of the most beloved of all, one of the beloved of all. So one of the most beloved of all English poets. He had a significant influence and in and versus a range of poets, and with it, that is so he was one of the most beloved of all English poets. He had a significant influence on diverse range of poets, and with his George Lewis and Borges stated that his first encounter with Keats, okay, who was a great experience, that a lot of who was really experienced that in all of his life. So he was one of the important in English poet, and the most beloved for everyone in English poets. So now, the poetry of Keats is the poetry of John Keats is characterized by a style heavily loaded with sensualities, most notably in the series of odes. This typical or the romantic poets, as they aimed to accentuate extreme emotion through an emphasis on natural imaginary. Actually, in this poetry we can understand the Keats characterized as well as by his style he was used in his poems, in his odes, heavily loaded with the sensibilities. That means most notably in the series of odes, this is a typical of a romantic poet, as they aimed to accentuate extreme emotion. Okay, he tried to explore the extreme emotion through an emphasis, gives the importance on a nature imaginary. So today his poems and letters are some of the most popular and most analyzed in English literature. Some of his most acclaimed works are, so here I mentioned some of his most acclaimed notable works: Ode to Nightingale, okay, Slip and Poetry, and the famous sonnet on first looking into Chopin's Homer. So these are the famous work of and then his styles was adapted in his odes. This is John Keats. So let's see another thing, that is the 10 greatest poems by John Keats. Okay, some greatest poems, some of the notable works, that is Fancy 1818, Ode on a Grecian on 1819, The Lord Byron 1814, Libellule Dame Saint Marset 1819, Ode on Melancholy 1819, Ode to Nightingale 1819, To Slip 1816, On Seeing the Elgin Marbles 1817. These are the notable poems of John Keats. So now we are come to the main part of our book, that is a poem Ode to Nightingale. So in this class we are going to discuss what is Ode to Nightingale, what is the theme, okay, when it was published. Those things we are going to see in this class. Ode to Nightingale is the longest of the 1819 odes with the 8 stanza containing a 10 lines each. The poem begins by describing the state of the poet. Okay, so for using a negative statements, using a negative statements to instantly the description of the poet's physical state, such as numbness, pain, and not through envy of the happy lot. Actually, this line was from first 1 to 5. Actually, Ode to Nightingale is the longest of the 1819 odes, which contain 8 stanza. 8 stanza containing 10 lines each. Okay, the poem begins by describing the state of the poet. First, the poem begins with, okay, the poem begins by describing his situation. Okay, using negative statements, to instantly the description of the poet's physical. Okay, instantly to a description of the poet's physical state, such as numbness, pain, and not through envy of the happy lot. While the ode is written to Nightingale, written in a Nightingale, the emphasis of the first line is placed upon the narrator rather than the bad. Okay, and Helen Vendor suggests that negation of the reader has a party in the discourse happen just as the long of the nightingales become the voice of a pure self-expression. In the third stanza, and the poet asks the nightingale to fade far away, casting it off just the narrator in ode to indolence has the love, ambition, uh, and Posey and the poet in the ode on Gratian on banished this Gratian on in a silence. So, Ode to Nightingale is a poem John Keats written either in the Garden of the Splendor Hymn, okay, Hampstead, London, or according to Keats' friend Charles Hermitage Brown, under a palm tree in the garden of Keats' house at Wentworth Place, also in Hampstead. According to Brown, Nightingale had built its meet near the house that he shared with Keats in the spring of 1819. Inspired by the bat's songs, Keats composed the poem in one day. It soon became one of his 1819 odes and was first published in Annals of the Fine Arts the following July. The poem is one of the most frequently anthologized in English language. Okay. Ode to Nightingale is a personal poem which describes Keats' journey into the state of negative capability. The tone of the poem rejects the optimistic pursuit of a pleasure found within the Keats' earliest poems, and instead explores the theme of nature, transience, and morality, the latter being particularly irrelevant to Keats. So it belongs to the one of the Keats' journey into the state of negative capability. The tone of the poem rejects the optimistic pursuit of a pleasure. So it was a totally rejects the optimistic pursuit of a pleasure found with the Keats' earliest poems and instead explore the theme of a nature, transience, and morality, the latter being particularly relevant to Keats. The Nightingale described experience a type of yeah. So in the fourth stanza, the poet states that he will fly to the nightingale rather than it into him, moving upon the wings of poesy, which leaves a Walter Jackson Bate to believe that while the poet intends to identify with the bird by describing the poem as being to it, the real identification in the narrative exists between the poet and his perception of the nightingale song. In his closing, the poem questions whether the bird's song has been real or a part of a dream. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Flight is that music. Do I work or wake or sleep? It's line from 79 to 80. And the theme of imagination once again arises as the poet appears according to Timothy Hilton, unable to distinguish between his own artistic imagination and the song which he believes to have spent spooned into the action. So the nightingale describes the experience a type of a death but does not actually die. Okay. Instead, the songbird is capable of living through its song, which is a fate that humans cannot expect. The poem ends with an acceptance that pleasure cannot last and that death is an inevitable part of life. In the poem, Keats imagines the loss of the physical world and sees himself dead. As a soul over which the nightingale sings, the contrast between an immortal nightingale and mortal man sitting in his garden is made all the more acute by an effort of the imagination. The presence of weather is noticeable in the poem, as a spring came early in 1819, bringing a nightingales all over the heath. So, here the nightingale, okay, here the nightingale describes the experience of a type of a death, but does not actually die, okay. So, Ode to Nightingale. It describes the experience of a type, experiences a type of death, but does not actually die. Instead, the songbird is capable of living through its song. Instead, the songbird is capable of living through its song, which is fate that humans cannot expect. Okay, the poem ends with an acceptance that pleasures cannot last and the death is an inevitable part of the life. So death is an inevitable one. Okay, and then it is the poem at last. The poem ends with an acceptable present. Pleasures cannot last. It is a acceptable one. The pleasure is acceptable ones cannot last, and the death is an unavoidable part of a life. In the poem, Keats imagines the loss of physical world and sees himself dead as a sword over which the nightingale sings. The contrast between the important nightingale and mortal man sitting in his garden, okay, in is made all the more acute by an effort by the imagination. So acute by more effort of the imagination. The presence whether is noticeable in the poem as spring came early in 1819, bringing nightingales all over the southern land. So this is the overall poem of Ode to Nightingale. So in this class we understand what is ode, and then what are the types of odes, and then who is the famous for odes, and then who is John Keats, and then what is his biography, and then what are the works he did, how he did, and then Ode to Nightingale. Okay, thank you, girls. Thank you for listening. If you have any doubt in this, you just ask in the comment section. Thank you, girls.